I was folding dish towels on a quiet Thursday when the phone rang. It was my son, Daniel, asking if I could stop by their place and water the fern in the kitchen. They were rushing out the door for a school recital and then a late dinner with friends. Of course, I said, I live 10 minutes away and I'm not made of stone. You say yes to the small things so the big things know where to land. I took the long way, yet the street where the maples arch over the road like green cathedral arms. It was nearly evening, the kind that smells like cut grass and faraway rain. I parked, let myself in with the spare key, and found the kitchen the way Sophie likes it. Marble wiped to a shine, lemon candle working hard at the corner, a neat lineup of glass containers gleaming on the second shelf of the refrigerator. She loves her containers. She has different lids for soups and salads and the kind of pasta that photographs well. The fern drooped like an apology. I gave it a long drink, then stood a moment at the sink, listening to their home be itself. Houses hum when they're loved. This one did. The hallway clock ticked like a calm heart. The air conditioner sighed. Somewhere upstairs, a drawer closed in the polite way a careful person closes it. I heard the front door, quick voices, a flurry of steps. Daniel kissed my cheek on his way past, still tying his tie. Cologne a little too hopeful. Sophie's perfume arrived a second later, bright and floral, like a bowl of fruit that knows it's being admired. Mom, she sang, breathless, one shoe half on, you are a lifesaver. We're late. The fern, thank you. She pointed her car keys at the counter like a wand. Oh, and she opened the refrigerator, her bracelets chiming. Don't forget to finish the leftovers in the fridge. The words were breezy, light as a napkin tossed aside. Then she was gone. Click of a heel, the lift of laughter at something Daniel said, the front door shutting gently. Their voices traveled down the walkway and vanished into the evening, like a radio being turned down. I stood where she'd left me. The refrigerator light spilled over the glass containers, clear as ice. The sentence sat beside me on the tile. Finish the leftovers. As if my days were hungry for scraps. As if the inside of my life were a Tupperware waiting for other people's remains. I don't think she meant it cruelly. That's what makes certain wounds so strange. They arrive in a cheerful voice with clean hair and a good coat. I closed the refrigerator softly. The light went out, but the words didn't. The fern perked. Water works quickly on the honestly thirsty. I wiped the rim of the sink, though it didn't need wiping, set the cloth back on its hook, and told myself to breathe. The trick to staying gentle is to keep breathing. If you hold your breath when somebody reduces you, you become smaller to fit the sentence. I walked through their rooms and did the tiny kindnesses no one asks for. Straightened a throw pillow, lifted a Lego from the rug, put the mail in a tidy pile. The piano held a program from last month's recital with a crayon star next to Mia's name. That made me smile. I love that child's stars. They always lean to the left like mine did at her age. Before I left, I opened the refrigerator again and looked at the neat line of containers. There was a quinoa salad with pomegranate seeds, a roasted chicken sliced in precise magazine pieces, half a pan of lasagna, the good kind where the edges brown and pretend to be brave. On the top shelf, a glass jar of custard Sophie makes on Sundays. She says it helps the weak know what it is. I took nothing. I closed the door, turned off the light over the stove, and locked up behind me. In the car, the sentence rode shotgun, buckled in like a guest. It said nothing on the drive home, but it didn't need to. I could feel it watching me. My house greeted me with the old lady version of a hug, lamps I've had for 30 years, the soft chair my husband used to fall asleep in, the clink of the cat's tag against her bowl. I set my purse down, put the kettle on, and went to my own refrigerator. It hummed a familiar note. Inside were my leftovers, a small bowl of chicken soup with too many carrots, a wedge of strawberry pie I'd promised myself I'd save for Sunday, half an onion wrapped in a rubber band of beeswax. Useful things. Honest things. I made tea and sat by the window where the lilacs bend toward the glass like ladies sharing a secret. The cat climbed into my lap and settled into a loaf. I stroked her ears and said, "We are not a leftover, you and I." The tea cooled while I thought. I carried the sentence into the quiet and turned it around the way you might turn a stone found in a garden. It wasn't heavy, it wasn't sharp, it simply didn't belong where someone had tossed it. I remembered other moments. The casual, "Mom, you don't mind doing pickup, right? You're around," dropped on a Wednesday like a feather that somehow bruised. The cheerful, "Could you bring those big plastic containers back? I need them," handed to me at the door the same day I'd returned them washed and stacked. The way my name had become, sometimes, a slot to fill. Maybe that's the secret of growing older in a family that runs. You start to hear your own name without the person attached. You become a function. Bring, watch, make, finish. I refuse to be a function. I will always be a verb. When the kettle clicked itself off, I reheated the tea in the microwave and laughed at myself. My husband used to tease me for doing that, said it was twice warmed wisdom. "Drink it the first time," he'd say. He's been gone 9 years, and I still save his jokes for when I need them. I didn't tell Daniel or Sophie how the sentence felt. Not that night. I don't believe in teaching people when I'm still bleeding, even if it's just a paper cut. I believe in letting the truth rise like bread. It needs warmth and a little time. The next day, I went about the small business of my life. Laundry folded in a stack with too much pride for fabric. A dust rag that knows every picture frame by name. A walk to the corner where the town's library leaves a little shelf of free books like a kindness. On the way back, my phone buzzed. It was Sophie, a photo of the kids smiling with cinnamon sugar on their lips. "We stopped for churros after school," she wrote. Then a second bubble. "Don't forget the leftovers." I would like to tell you my heart was gracious in that instant. It wasn't. It sank, like a spoon eased into pudding. The same sentence now with a smiley face. The weapon had a sticker on it. I didn't reply. The clouds were practicing their gray, and I felt a small rain inside my chest. On the porch, I wiped my feet as if the sentence were mud. I stood in my kitchen and looked at my refrigerator again, its white door freckled with magnets. A grocery list, Mia's crayon son with eyelashes, a recipe card in my mother's hand for lemon bars that cure most ills. Finish the leftovers. I whispered it out loud to hear how it sounded in my house. It didn't sound right. I warmed my soup and ate it slowly, one carrot at a time, the way a person signs their own name on a document no one else has seen. Then I washed the bowl and set it in the rack to dry, shaped like a small moon. I made the bed with the good quilt because Friday deserved to feel important. I watered my fern, which never droops because it knows I am faithful. Faithfulness keeps plants alive, and sometimes people. All that day, I listened for the thread that would turn hurt into instruction. By evening, I found it lying where I leave my reading glasses. If you do not teach people how to see you, they will use whatever picture is easiest. I wrote it down in my notebook because sentences behave better on paper than trapped in a chest. The phone rang again. Daniel, quick and kind. He wanted to drop by with the kids after soccer on Saturday, and I said, of course, my door has hinges for a reason. He asked if I needed anything, and I almost said, yes, I need your wife to hear herself. But that's not a son's job. That's mine. After we hung up, I took my pie from the refrigerator and cut a piece the size of a promise. The strawberries were more honest than the store kind. They bled into the crust like they had nothing to hide. I sat with it at the table, the lamp pulling a circle of light around my plate, and I decided what I would do. I would not scold. Scolding makes adults into children and children into rebels. I would not perform my hurt like a play. Performances end, and everyone claps and forgets. I would set a table and let dignity take the head chair. Saturday morning came dressed in blue. The kids brought their tumble of noise and cleats and the kind of joy that forgets to wipe its feet. I smiled until my face remembered how. We made grilled cheese and ate it standing up, which is how the truly hungry eat it. Daniel fixed the squeak in my back door because he can't help himself. Good men look for squeaks. When the children ran into the yard to race the wind, he said, "Mom, you're quiet." And I said, "I'm thinking," which is the elder code for, I have a gentle fire under something. Sophie arrived last, her hair in a scarf, a new set of containers under her arm. She kissed my cheek and thanked me, and I thanked her for thanking me, because praise deserves to be seen when it remembers to show up. She set the containers on my counter, opened my refrigerator as if it were her own, and reached for space. "Mom," she said, breezy as ever, "don't forget to finish the—" I laid my hand on the door and guided it closed, slow as a hymn. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "I don't finish other people's leftovers." She blinked. Oh, I just meant, I know what you meant, I said, warm as tea. I'm not angry. I'm just not a leftover person. I am a fresh plate person. If you'd like to share, invite me to the table. Silence. A good one. The kind that calls people back to themselves. Color rose in her face. She arranged it into a smile that tried to argue with the truth and lost. You're right, she said finally, the words coming out like a folded napkin. That was thoughtless. I'm sorry. I touched her elbow. You are loved. That's the main dish. She exhaled and laughed, a small, honest sound. Teach me how to say things better, she said. I will, I answered. But teach me how you like your lemon bars. I'm thinking of making them tomorrow, and I want them to taste like the kind of Sunday you'll remember. We stood there in my tiny kitchen, two women on either side of a sentence that had finally put down its weapon. Out the window, the children's laughter threaded the morning like a new hymn. Daniel called from the yard to ask if anyone had seen the red ball. The cat announced the sunbeam she'd chosen for herself. My house hummed, proud of me. I poured Sophie coffee, and we sat at the table where everything important in this family has been decided. Who we forgive, what we risk, when to say enough, and how to keep loving with our hands open. She told me she hadn't slept well, that work had been loud, that sometimes she said things to make the day move faster. I told her I understood, but that words remain even when days don't. She nodded and asked for a second cup. Before they left, she opened her trunk to show me the cake she'd bought for later. She apologized for not baking, and I said, Honey, the only rule in my kitchen is that sweetness is welcome. And she laughed like she believed me. When the house was mine again, I walked to the refrigerator, opened it, and took stock of my own small world. I slid the lemon bars recipe to the front of the drawer and set out the butter to soften. The afternoon shifted its weight from one foot to the other, getting comfortable. I wrote in my notebook the line simple enough to memorize. I am not what's left. I am what's served. Then I closed the book, washed the cups, and put on a fresh pot of tea. Tomorrow would be part 2 of this lesson, and it would arrive in the shape of a pan, dusted with sugar, and the soft sound of a woman remembering her own worth while she measures flour. In the quiet, the refrigerator hummed its faithful note, and the fern lifted its fronds toward the window. The evening lay down beside me like a nap. Old cat. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the light inside my chest stand up a little taller and say, I set the table too. Sunday morning arrived with sunlight soft as butter melting across the counter. I'd already measured flour, sugar, and that pinch of salt that separates the good recipes from the forgettable ones. The radio murmured an old hymn, something about grace finding its way home. It felt right. I cracked the eggs one by one, each yellow circle steady in its little bowl. Cooking for people you love is a kind of prayer. You whisper forgiveness into batter, patience into every stir. As the oven warmed, I thought about Sophie's face when I'd told her I wasn't a leftover person. Not angry, just startled, like someone had looked her in the eye for the first time in a long while. By the time the lemon bars were cooling, Daniel's car rolled into the driveway. The kids tumbled out like laughter-wearing sneakers. Sophie followed, holding a bouquet of tulips, and I felt the corners of my mouth lift before I even meant them to. Mom, she said softly, these are for you. I took the flowers, still cool from the morning air. They're beautiful. I owe you more than flowers, she said, eyes downcast. I thought about what you said, about leftovers. I realized I've been treating your time like extra space in my week. Her honesty landed gentle but true. Awareness is a fine start, I said. We all forget what love looks like when we're rushing. She nodded. I want to do better. Then sit, I said, motioning to the table. You can start by having one of these before the kids find them. She laughed, the tension leaving her shoulders as quickly as it had come. We sat together with lemon dust on our fingers, sunlight on our faces, and something unspoken between us that didn't need words anymore. Daniel joined us a few minutes later, holding a cup of my tea in his big, gentle hands. Mom, he said, these bars taste like home. They taste like boundaries, I replied with a smile. But thank you. He raised an eyebrow. Only you would make that sound comforting. Boundaries are comfort, I said. They tell love where to stand so it doesn't lose its balance. After lunch, the children helped me in the garden. Mia watered everything except the plants that needed it. Leo discovered a snail and declared it his new brother. Sophie took photos, real ones this time, not for social media, but for memory. I could see in her face that something had shifted. Not guilt, understanding. When they left, she hugged me tighter than usual. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not yelling, for just showing me." "Quiet lessons last longer," I told her. That evening, after the house sighed back into silence, I sat with my notebook again. I wrote, "There are two kinds of love, the one that takes and the one that tends. I will always choose the second." I closed the book, washed the lemon sugar bowl, and smiled at my reflection in the window. The woman looking back wasn't invisible anymore. She was soft, but she glowed from somewhere deep, the kind of light that doesn't flicker when unseen. The refrigerator hummed behind me, patient and steady. I walked over, opened the door, and placed 2 lemon bars inside. One for tomorrow, one for later. This time, the leftovers weren't reminders of what was taken. They were proof of what remained. The next few days moved like calm water, steady, clear, and a little deeper than it looked. I went about my usual routines: morning tea, the garden, my crosswords at the kitchen table. But beneath all that quiet rhythm, something felt different. A peace that wasn't just the absence of noise, more like the presence of respect. Every so often, I'd catch myself smiling for no reason. Then I'd remember. I had finally said what needed to be said. And more importantly, it had landed. By Thursday afternoon, I was pruning the rosebush by the porch when I heard a car door shut in the driveway. Sophie's voice carried up the walk, softer than usual. "Hi, Mom," she called. "Hope I'm not intruding." I wiped my hands on my apron and waved her up. "Not at all, dear. Roses and I were just having a disagreement." She laughed, the sound light and real. "I brought something for you." In her hands was a basket, linen-lined, neatly packed, covered with a folded napkin. I tilted my head. "Oh, what's this?" She set it down on the porch rail and smiled a little shyly. "Dinner. Made it myself." "Dinner?" I said, pretending to gasp. "You mean for me?" She grinned. "Yes, for you. No leftovers, no requests, no favors. Just dinner. I wanted you to sit down tonight and eat something that didn't come from a container." For a moment, I couldn't find words. I lifted the napkin and saw a homemade roast chicken, roasted vegetables, even little biscuits shaped like hearts. The smell alone could have melted pride. "I followed one of your recipes," she said, cheeks pink, "the one you texted me last week. And don't worry, I didn't burn the pan. Daniel supervised." I laughed softly, blinking away the kind of tears that come from joy disguised as surprise. "You remembered." "Of course I did," she said. "I've been thinking a lot about that day in your kitchen, about what you said. That you're a fresh plate person. You were right. You've given me so many meals, so much help, and I never thought about what I was serving back." I reached out and took her hand, flour-dusted fingers meeting mine. "You just did, sweetheart. You gave me what I didn't know I was hungry for: effort." She exhaled, smiling. "I want to do better at that. I want the kids to grow up seeing that love cooks both ways." "That's the recipe for family," I said quietly. "Equal servings." We sat on the porch steps together for a while, letting the afternoon soften into gold. She told me about work, how she'd asked for fewer travel days, how she'd started walking the kids to school instead of rushing through drop-off. "It's strange," she said. "I thought slowing down would make me lose things. But I've gained so much more time with them, with all of you." "Peace doesn't waste time," I said. "It multiplies it." Her eyes welled up, and she leaned her head on my shoulder like she hadn't done since the early years of her marriage. "You always know how to say the thing I didn't know I needed to hear." "I've had decades of practice," I smiled. "The secret is saying it after the anger's gone." When she left, she insisted on setting the table herself before driving home. I watched through the kitchen window as she arranged my plates, unfolded napkins, even lit the small candle in the center, the one I only used for holidays. She placed a note beside the dish, then turned, waved, and blew a kiss from the porch before getting into the car. After she'd gone, I went to the table. The note was written in her neat, rounded handwriting, for the woman who taught me that leftovers feed the stomach, but fresh effort feeds the soul. "Love, Sophie." I sat down, hands resting in my lap for a long time before I could bring myself to lift the fork. The roast was still warm. The candle flickered like it had been waiting years for this exact moment, to shine on a dinner that didn't taste like obligation. That night, I wrote another line in my notebook. Sometimes an apology arrives baked in butter and rosemary. Eat it slowly. It's how love learns humility. I slept better than I had in months. The refrigerator hummed softly, proud to hold something new, this time not leftovers, but a plate wrapped in care labeled, "For tomorrow if you want it." I smiled into the dark and whispered to the quiet house, "See, darling, she's learning." And the house, old and kind, seemed to whisper back, "Yes, Grandma, so are you." The morning after Sophie's visit, the house felt different. It wasn't louder or brighter, it just felt seen, like the walls themselves knew something had changed. I brewed my tea, took a slow sip, and smiled at the empty chair across from me. That chair had held so many people's worries over the years. Daniel's late night doubts, Sophie's early frustrations, even the kids' sticky fingered confessions about broken vases. But today, it held peace. The doorbell rang around noon. Daniel stood outside, hands in his pockets, looking sheepish. He's a big man now, taller than his father ever was. But that day, I saw a bit of the boy who used to hide behind my skirts when the world was too loud. "Hey, Mom," he said, stepping inside. "Got a minute?" "I always have a minute for my son," I said, leading him to the kitchen. He glanced at the basket Sophie had left the day before, empty now, but still sitting proudly on the counter. "She told me she came by," he said, "and that she cooked." "She did," I replied, "and it was good. She's learning that food isn't just flavor, it's communication." He nodded slowly, running a hand through his hair. "She's been different this week, calmer, kinder. I think that talk you two had, it got through." I leaned back in my chair. Sometimes it's not about the words, Daniel. It's about the quiet that comes after them. He looked down, almost embarrassed. "You know, I've been thinking, too, about how often I let things slide. The way she'd talk to you sometimes, the way I'd just stay quiet." "You were trying to keep peace," I said. "That's what good men do. But peace without truth is just polite pretending." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I see that now. I should have spoken up. You've done so much for us, and I acted like it was nothing special." I reached across the table and touched his hand. "You didn't need to say it then, dear. You're saying it now. That's what matters." He smiled, eyes glistening in a way he quickly blinked away. "You always make it sound so simple." "It is simple," I said softly. "It's just not easy." Later that evening, Daniel stayed for dinner. I made stew. Nothing fancy, just what his father used to love. He helped me set the table, moving slower than usual, as if each fork placement was a small act of apology. As we ate, he said, "Mom, you know what's funny? I used to think you were quiet because you didn't like conflict, but now I realize you're quiet because you understand it." I smiled. "Understanding is just listening long enough to know when silence can do more than shouting." He chuckled. "You should write that down." "I already did," I said, tapping the little notebook beside me. "It's on the same page as your father's old joke about burned toast." That made him laugh, a full open laugh that filled the kitchen. "God, I miss Dad," he said softly after. "Me too," I whispered. "But I think he'd be proud of us today." He looked around the room, eyes landing on the candle Sophie had lit the night before. "Yeah," he said, "he would." After Daniel left, I stood at the doorway and watched him drive off, taillights glowing red against the darkening street. He waved once before turning the corner, and I felt that familiar tug in my chest, the kind a mother never outgrows. Inside, I poured myself another cup of tea and opened my notebook again. The page waited patiently. I wrote, "Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is nothing at all, and still the world hears you." I paused, thinking of Sophie's flowers still bright on the counter, of Daniel's gentle apology, of how the whole family had started to slow down just enough to notice me, and maybe even each other. For years, I thought I'd grown quiet because life had gotten smaller, but I realized tonight that my quiet had only grown wider. It reached into other people's hearts, and somehow they began to hear themselves inside it. That's what time does, I suppose. It softens your voice until your truth fits into someone else's pause. The clock ticked toward midnight. The house, old and loyal, whispered its soft hum around me. And in that quiet, I felt the kind of love that doesn't need to be spoken, the kind that fills a room long after the people have gone home. Tomorrow, I'd visit Sophie and the kids again. Maybe I'd bring lemon bars. Maybe I'd just bring presents. Both, I think, would be enough. Sunday afternoon, I walked the familiar sidewalk toward Daniel and Sophie's home. The air smelled of cinnamon and cold, like winter was peeking over the fence but hadn't quite come in yet. I carried a small basket of my own this time, lemon bars, warm bread, and a note tucked under the cloth. It wasn't a big gesture, just my way of saying, I see the change. I honor it. When I reached their porch, the door swung open before I could knock. Mia and Leo burst out, faces glowing like sunrise. "Grandma, you came!" Leo shouted, hugging my legs with the force of a small hurricane. Mia held up something shiny, a fork. "We set your place," I laughed. "My place?" Sophie appeared behind them, her apron dusted with flour, hair pulled back in a messy bun. "Surprise," she said with that kind of smile that starts in the eyes. "We're having Sunday dinner, and it's not leftovers." I stepped inside. The house smelled of roast, herbs, and warmth. The table was set beautifully. Candles flickering, napkins folded neatly, a single daisy resting in a small vase beside my plate. Daniel stood at the stove, pretending he wasn't nervous. "We might have gone a little overboard," he said, glancing at Sophie. "Overboard is the best kind of board," I said, setting my basket down. Sophie took it and smiled when she saw the bread. "I thought you'd bring these," she said softly. "I saved space for them." That sentence, "I saved space for them," landed somewhere deep, because for months it had felt like I was always being fit into someone else's schedule, someone else's plan. But this time there was a chair with my name on it, and a meal made with thought, not convenience. "Sit, Mom," Daniel said. "We've got everything handled." It wasn't until I sat that I noticed what was at the center of the table. A small, handwritten card propped against the salt shaker. In Sophie's handwriting it said, "Family, the people who feed your heart before your plate." I touched the card gently. "You made this?" Sophie nodded. "The kids helped." Mia beamed. "I drew the heart, and I spilled the glue," Leo added proudly. I laughed, my eyes watering a little. "Well, it's perfect." Dinner was noisy and warm, the kind of noise that feels like music. There was laughter, crumbs on the table, and gravy stains no one cared about. Daniel kept refilling my glass. Sophie made sure I got the crispiest part of the roast, even though I could tell she wanted it herself. At one point, Leo asked, "Grandma, do you always make everyone's food taste better?" I smiled. "Maybe it's not the food, sweetheart. Maybe it's the company." Sophie looked up, eyes glistening, and said, "No, it's you. You've changed how this house feels." I shook my head gently. "No, darling, you all changed it yourselves. I just stopped being quiet about what I needed." Daniel nodded. That was the part we had to learn. After dinner, we cleared the table together. Sophie insisted I sit, but I helped anyway. Habits of a lifetime don't fade overnight. She handed me a mug of hot chocolate instead of tea. "You've earned something sweet," she said. "Sweetness is earned," I smiled, and shared. The kids crawled up beside me on the couch, wrapping themselves in the old blanket I'd crocheted years ago. It had seen spills, naps, and tears, the kind of fabric that remembers touch. Sophie came over with a small photo frame. Inside was a picture from that day in my kitchen, the day she'd brought dinner and the candlelight glowed between us. Underneath, she'd written, "No more leftovers, only love." I couldn't help it. The tears came, soft and grateful. "You didn't have to do this," I said. "I know," she whispered. "That's why it matters." Later, when the house quieted and the kids drifted to sleep, Daniel walked me to the door. The porch light hummed like an old friend. "You know, Mom," he said, "I used to think lessons came in lectures, but you've taught me more in silence than any book could." I smiled, slipping on my coat. "That's because silence doesn't argue. It waits." He hugged me. Not the quick kind, but the kind that says everything words can't. "I love you," he murmured. "I know," I said softly. "Now go love them the same way." When I got home that night, the house greeted me like it always did, steady, familiar, alive. I put the framed photo on my mantel beside one of my late husband. The candlelight in the picture seemed to flicker even now. I sat in my chair, the one that has molded itself to my shape over the years, and whispered to the quiet air. "I guess we all learned something, didn't we? Respect doesn't demand, it demonstrates." The clock ticked once, as if agreeing. I smiled, took a slow sip of tea, and wrote the final line in my notebook. "One gentle correction can heal 1,000 small hurts. Speak kindly, but speak. Love may be patient, but respect must be taught." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt whole. The house hummed. The night leaned close, and Grandma's whispers turned into peace.